Number 1. Aron Ralston. Picture this. You are alone in a narrow slot canyon in Utah, the kind of crack in the rock barely wider than your shoulders. You are climbing down through it, having a great day, when a boulder above you shifts and drops and pins your arm against the canyon wall. It does not crush it cleanly, it traps it, and here is the detail that turns an accident into a nightmare. You did not tell anyone where you were going. Nobody on earth knows you are here. Now wait 5 days. That is roughly what Aron Ralston did, around 127 hours, trapped, with a small amount of water and a cheap multi-tool. And the story everyone remembers is how he got out, which we will get to. But the part that actually matters is quieter than that. Because rescue was not coming. Nobody was looking. And he slowly worked through the full menu of options, every one of them, until he was left with exactly one. The one almost none of us believe we could ever choose. To free himself, he had to leave part of himself behind. And the thing that made it possible was not strength, it was acceptance. Before he could do it, he had to decide fully that his trapped arm was already gone, that it belonged to the canyon now. The hardest part of the most physical act imaginable happened entirely in his head. Ralston escaped the rock by losing a part of himself. The next man was swallowed whole by a mountain and crawled back out of it. Number 2. Joe Simpson. Let me just say the ending first, because it is more honest. By every rule of mountaineering, Joe Simpson should have died on a peak called Ciula Grande in the Peruvian Andes in 1985. His own climbing partner was so certain he was dead that he later had to defend, for years, the decision he made next. Here is the short version of an unthinkable situation. High on the mountain, Simpson falls and shatters his leg, drives the shin bone up through the knee joint. On a mountain, that is usually a death sentence by itself. His partner tries to lower him down on ropes, in a storm, in the dark, and at one point, Simpson goes over an edge and ends up dangling in midair, a dead weight his partner cannot see or hear, slowly pulling them both off the mountain. So his partner, freezing with no good options, makes the call that haunts the whole story. He cuts the rope. Simpson falls into a crevasse and lives. And then, with a useless leg, no food, and no way to climb out the top, he does the only thing left. He goes deeper, finds a way out the bottom, and starts to crawl. For about 3 days, across a glacier and a field of broken rock. And the trick he used to do it is the part worth keeping. He stopped thinking about being rescued. The goal was too big, too far, too hopeless, so he shrank it. He picked a rock 20 minutes away and gave himself a brutal little deadline to reach it. Then the next rock, then the next. He survived by chopping survival into pieces small enough to carry one at a time. He reached camp with hours to spare. His partner was literally packing up to leave. Simpson fell into a mountain and lived. The next person fell out of the sky. Number 3, Juliane Koepcke, 1971. A 17-year-old girl is on a flight over the Peruvian rainforest with her mother when the plane flies into a brutal storm, is struck by lightning, and comes apart in the air. And Juliane, still strapped into her seat, falls, roughly 2 miles, down into the Amazon canopy. Of the roughly 90 people on board, she is the only one who survives. Sit with the fact of that for a second. She fell 2 miles, still buckled into an airplane seat, and lived, with a broken collarbone, a gashed arm, and one eye swollen shut. The fall, honestly, was luck. Some combination of the seat, the spinning, and the thick canopy breaking her descent. Physics had a good day. But here is what makes her different. Surviving the fall was the easy part. Now she was alone, injured, in one of the most hostile environments on the planet, and the search planes could not see her under the trees. What saved her next was not luck. It was a single thing her father, a biologist, had once told her. If you are lost in the jungle and you find running water, follow it downstream. Small streams lead to bigger streams lead to rivers, and rivers lead to people. So she found a creek, and for 11 days, injured and starving and alone, she waded and walked downstream until she stumbled on a shelter and eventually on people. One remembered sentence from one conversation with her dad turned a death sentence into a set of directions. Koepcke fell 2 miles and walked out of a jungle. The next fall was higher still, and it is, on paper, the highest in the record books. Number 4, Vesna Vulović. This one holds an official world record that frankly should not be possible to hold. The highest fall ever survived by a human being without a parachute. In 1972, Vesna Vulović was a flight attendant on a passenger jet when an explosion tore the plane apart in midair. She was trapped in a section of the fuselage, and the official figure for how far she fell is around 10,000 meters, roughly the cruising altitude of an airliner. She came down inside a piece of the aircraft, and against all sense, she lived. Severe injuries, a long recovery, a period of paralysis, but alive. Now, in the spirit of this channel, here is the honest footnote, because it is interesting in its own right. Years later, an investigation argued that the plane may actually have broken up much lower than the official altitude, which, if true, would lower the record dramatically. The two versions have been argued over ever since, and I am not going to pretend to settle it for you here. But notice that the debate is essentially, was this the most impossible survival ever recorded, or merely one of them? Either way, she fell out of a disintegrating aircraft and walked the earth for decades afterward. That was the danger of the open sky. The next was the danger of deep, dark water, with a man sealed inside it. Number 5. Harrison Okene. A tugboat off the coast of Nigeria capsizes before dawn and sinks fast to the seabed, around 30 meters down. The crew is lost. But one man, the cook, Harrison Okene, manages to scramble into a small bathroom as the boat goes over. And as the vessel settles upside down on the bottom, the water keeps rising around him. And then, mercifully, it stops. Trapped against the upturned floor is a pocket of air, maybe 4 feet of it. In total, absolute darkness. Now wait nearly 3 days, roughly 60 hours, in the cold and the black, on a shrinking cushion of air at the bottom of the sea, with no light, no food, and no reason to believe anyone is coming. Because they were not coming. Not for him. He was, as far as anyone above knew, one more body in a sunken boat. And the physiology here is genuinely strange and genuinely terrifying. That pocket of air kept him breathing far longer than seems possible. But breathing air under that much pressure for that long does dangerous things to the body. Things that would make simply hauling him to the surface its own kind of death sentence. So here is the scene. Days later, divers arrive to recover bodies, not to rescue anyone. One of them is moving through the wreck in the gloom when a hand reaches out of the dark and touches him. The diver nearly came out of his suit. That moment, a living hand emerging from a tomb on the seabed was caught on the diver's helmet camera, and it remains one of the most astonishing pieces of rescue footage ever recorded. Okene survived 3 days against the water. The next man survived more than 4 months on top of it. Number 6. Poon Lim. Here is a world record nobody ever wants to challenge. The longest anyone has survived alone, adrift at sea, on a raft. The number is 133 days. During the Second World War, Poon Lim was a sailor on a British merchant ship that was torpedoed in the Atlantic. He found himself on a small wooden life raft, alone, with a few tins of supplies and some water. Enough for maybe a couple of weeks. He was out there for more than 4 months. And what kept him alive was not one dramatic act. It was 133 days of small, relentless cleverness. He rigged a canvas to collect rainwater. He pulled a wire out of a flashlight and bent it into a fishhook. He used a biscuit as bait to catch a fish, then used that fish as bait to catch bigger ones. He even, at one point, caught a bird and a shark. And this is the detail that gets me. He forced himself to swim around the raft twice a day in the open ocean to keep his muscles from wasting away, which is a level of discipline most of us cannot summon to go to the gym on a Tuesday. His survival skill in the end was patience. The sheer grinding willingness to solve the same problems every single day for over 4 months and never once decide that today was the day to stop. Poon Lim had nothing but water around him. The next man had no water at all. Quick aside before we keep going, because the next few of these are the ones that genuinely rearranged my sense of what a person can take. If you are finding this as quietly astonishing as I do, these stories of ordinary people walking back across a line the rest of us assume is final, then subscribing genuinely helps. It is the single thing that tells the algorithm to show this to more people who would actually appreciate it. No hard sell. Now from too much water to an ocean of sand. Number 7. Mauro Prosperi. From an ocean of water to an ocean of sand. Mauro Prosperi was an experienced competitor in one of the toughest foot races on Earth, a multi-day ultramarathon across the Sahara Desert. And in the middle of it, a sandstorm rolled in. Not a gentle haze, a wall of sand that blotted out the sun and the horizon and every landmark for hours. When it finally cleared, Prosperi looked around, and the desert had been wiped clean. He had no idea which way the race was. He had no idea which way anything was. He was lost in the Sahara for somewhere around 9 days. He survived by drinking what little he had, and then, when that was gone, by drinking his own urine. The desert survival of absolute last resort. He sheltered in an abandoned shrine. He ate bats. He walked by some accounts so far in the wrong direction that he crossed out of one country and into another. And I will handle the hardest part of his story the way it deserves. At his lowest, alone and certain he would never be found, he reached the point of giving up entirely. He decided to end it, and it did not work. And in that strange, terrible aftermath, something in him turned back toward living, and he kept walking. He was eventually found, on the edge of survival, by a nomadic family. He had endured days past the point where thirst alone should have finished him. Prosperi was nearly killed by the heat, and saved by sheer stubbornness. The next person was killed by the cold, and then, impossibly, unkilled by it. Number 8. Anna Bågenholm. And if you have been wondering about the woman on that operating table from the very beginning, here she is. In 1999, Anna Bågenholm, a young doctor, was skiing in Norway when she fell and slid headfirst into an icy mountain stream and got pinned under a thick layer of ice. She found a small pocket of air and held on for a while, but she was trapped under there for over an hour before she could be cut free. By the time she was pulled out, her heart had stopped, and her body's core temperature had fallen to around 13.7 degrees Celsius, the lowest survived body temperature ever recorded at the time. She was, by every standard measure, dead. So why did the hospital team keep going for hours? 3 reasons, and they stack up. The first is the cold itself, and this is the beautiful, counterintuitive heart of it. The very thing that was killing her was also protecting her. As her body temperature crashed, everything slowed down, including her brain's need for oxygen, almost to nothing. She was so cold that her brain could survive without a heartbeat far longer than a warm brain ever could. The cold was the murderer and the bodyguard at the same time. The second reason is the team, a large coordinated effort to slowly, carefully rewarm her blood and restart her body, essentially writing the playbook as they went. And the third reason is plain luck. The temperature of the water, the timing, the precise way she was trapped, the fact that the right people were ready. And here is why she anchors this whole video. Anna Bågenholm did not just survive. Her case helped change how emergency medicine treats the deeply, dangerously cold. It is a big part of why that grim little rule exists in the form it does. You are not dead until you are warm and dead. She is the reason that sentence has teeth. The cold nearly took her, and then handed her back. The next mountain took a man's life, and then watched him get up and take it back. Number 9. Beck Weathers. During the 1996 disaster on Mount Everest, the one that several books and films have been made about, a climber named Beck Weathers was caught high on the mountain, in the so-called death zone, in a savage storm. He went snowblind, collapsed, and was found unresponsive, frozen with no realistic chance of survival. And so, with dozens of lives at stake and impossible choices to make, the other climbers did the only thing the situation seemed to allow. They left him to die. Not once. Twice. He was assessed, judged beyond saving, and left in the snow. And then a second time, after he had been brought partway back, written off again as too far gone to move. And then Beck Weathers stood up, alone, blind, with hands frozen into useless clubs. Hours into being effectively dead, something switched back on. He later said what pulled him up out of the snow was not grit or training. It was a hallucination, a vision of his family, his wife and children, and the sudden, total refusal to leave them. And on that, and that alone, he got to his feet and walked, by himself, into camp. The people who had said their goodbyes to him watched a man they were certain was dead come stumbling out of the white. One of them described him as looking like he had been dipped in porcelain. They thought they were seeing a ghost. Weathers survived a mountain alone. The last group survived one together for 72 days by making a choice almost no one should ever have to. Number 10. The Andes. This is the most famous survival story in the world, and also the heaviest, so I'm going to tell it straight and treat it with the respect it is owed. In October of 1972, a plane carrying a young Uruguayan rugby team, along with friends and family, crashed high in the Andes Mountains. The fuselage came to rest in deep snow, far above any easy reach, in a white wilderness with no food, almost no shelter from the cold, and no way for anyone to spot them. The official search for them was called off after just over a week. The world had decided they were gone. They were not gone. They were up there for 72 days, and surviving that long took 3 things. The first was organization. They turned the broken fuselage into a tiny society, rationing what little they had, assigning roles, making decisions together, doing the unglamorous work of staying alive one freezing night at a time. They even survived an avalanche partway through that killed several of them as they slept. The second is the part everyone knows, and I will state it once, plainly and without sensationalism, because it deserves nothing less. They had no food. And to stay alive, the survivors made the agonizing collective decision to eat the bodies of those who had already died, many of them their own friends and teammates. It is the choice most of us cannot even let ourselves imagine. They made it so that someone might live, and then they carried the weight of it for the rest of their lives. And the third thing was the walk. After more than 2 months, with no rescue coming, 2 of them, Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa, climbed out, up and over the mountains, in thin clothing, with almost no food, with no real mountaineering gear, for around 10 days, until they found a man on the other side and brought back help. Of the 45 people on that plane, 16 came home. And when the rescuers finally reached the crash site, they could barely believe it. Nobody was supposed to be alive up there. The search had ended weeks before. The mountains had been left to keep their dead, and instead, the dead walked down.